So let's talk about organic ways to grow your show. So many of us put the effort into creating amazing content, but we don't use strategy, meaning we aren't optimizing our podcast to be found. We aren't actually showing up in other places. Once you get to a certain point, when you have the word of mouth, when you've mastered your niche, you understand those ideal search terms, then you can stop making as much effort. But yes, it does take some effort to grow your show. And if you are not willing to throw some money at advertising, then you're going to want to tune in, because here are 10 ways to grow your show organically. Yes, again, this is the slower burn, but it's either time or spending money if you want to grow your show. And don't forget, you still have to create amazing content or people will not be coming back. So are you ready? Let's go. Welcome to the podcast about podcasting, where you guessed it, we're talking all things podcasting, but not just in a sense of strategy of how to launch, grow, and monetize your show. Of course, you're going to get that. But we're going deep into how podcasting can actually help you build your community, build your confidence, and if you're willing to lean deep into this platform, it can be the ticket to the life of your dreams, because it'll inspire you to go deeper, to get to know yourself. And as we know, success starts from within. If you are ready to stop being a ripple in this world and bust out your tsunami of change you know you were made for, it's podcasting for your soul. I'm your host, Jen Dragonette, so let's dig in. This is one of the hardest topics for most people, and why the majority of podcasts fade out. Yes, there are 4 million podcasts, but of those 4 million podcasts, how many are active? How many have actually reached past 50 episodes? I had a very surprising conversation with Travis Chappell from Guestio. So he's the CEO and founder of Guestio and the host of Travis Makes Friends. And when we had this conversation, it's around 250 to 300,000 podcasts that are actually active. Meaning every other podcast of those 4 million indexed have pod faded out. And the problem is the number growth. The problem is the fact that people aren't making money from their show because they haven't positioned it correctly. Remember, you do not have to have a huge audience to make the money that you desire, but you do have to keep getting your stuff in new ears if you want to continue to grow your business. So how can you grow your podcast? How can you actually get your podcast audience to a place where you're happy, where it's bringing in the cash money that you want, where it's not quite to sponsorship levels, but it's enough to monetize? So the number one issue that I see is podcasts that are too broad. There are so many podcasts out there that are entrepreneurship, that are spiritual, name it. Look in your niche and see how many podcasts there are. The more you're able to define your audience and speak to that one niche, that one person, and I know you're rolling your eyes at me, but it truly helps. When I changed this podcast from podcasting for your soul to the cure for pod fade, you know what I did? I defined a new audience. It niched me down from people who were toe dipping in or were thinking about having a podcast to you're all actually podcasters now. You're people that have shows that want to not fade out. You're people that are burnt out, that are thinking about giving up, but know there's so much value in creating legacy content. Defining your niche allows you to attract that audience. And you have to have a clear focus, a clear niche for your podcast. Because if it's not, you're talking to everyone, therefore you're talking to no one. So tailor your content to meet that person, that niche's interests and the needs and how you can serve them. Also, when you're doing guests, as a little bonus tip, when you have guests on your show, make sure that they serve that specific niche too. They don't have to be serving in the exact same way, but make sure it's not totally off left field just because the person has a bigger reach. Their audience will most likely not come because here's the thing, they've already heard that person's story a bunch of times. So it's actually better for you to get on someone else's show or find some sort of a collaboration that works a little bit better in both people's favor. I do believe interviews are a great way to network. The next thing you've got to know is to create high quality content. There are so many podcasts out there that I personally can't listen to, whether it's great content or like whatever, but they are recording from their phone without a headset even, and there's so much background noise, and all of a sudden you're talking really low, and then the next thing they're yelling at you and you have to turn up and down the volume. That just doesn't work for me. So you've got to keep your listeners engaged and coming back, which is going to be producing high quality content, teaching, education, inspiring, motivational, or give them action items. So, this does mean that you need to have some equipment. You need an external microphone on something. It doesn't have to be high end. It doesn't have to be expensive, but you do need a little bit of equipment. You do need to put a little bit of time into editing, and you need to be consistent. So content does matter. Quality does matter. People are a little less into quality now because they got so used to Zoom over this last 3 years of craziness. But you still, if you want to stand out, you gotta have quality. You've got to show up with quality, value-driven content. The next thing, we'll run through the last few, but you've got to optimize for SEO. This is how you attract listeners without having to go find for them, without having to pay for them. And just know that podcast players are not the best place for people to find you. Yes, they can search relative keywords inside your podcast, player, but this means that you may want to invest in putting a video podcast up, having a blog, creating some other ways that people can find your show via SEO that are a little bit more extensive. You also need to promote your podcast. This podcast has not promoted much because I was testing to see if you could grow strictly on SEO. And what I learned is that I topped out at about 120 listeners per episode based on SEO alone. Hey, that's magical. We did like 4 posts in Pinterest. I think I did 1 post on social media, and we've been averaging like 120 people listening per episode. Hey there, thanks for being here. So it's possible. But if you want to grow, you need to start sharing on platforms, different social medias, do guest blogging, guest outreach, reach out to other people in your niche, like influencers, and see if you can pay to promote or do some sort of a collaboration where you can promote to their audience. The other thing that I see happen so much is that we fail. Number 5 is engaging with your audience, because just having someone talk at you all the time is not helpful. Find a way to build a community, answer questions, create, community is everything. Podcast community is huge. This is one of the reasons why, even though I stepped back off of social media, I never got rid of my Facebook community, because truly that community and that connection, that is where all the magic happens. We're building friendships, we're building connections, we're having human conversations. We're not just looking at everybody as the next number in our bank account. It's all about those connections. And then use guests to host. Increase your podcast by creating a wider network by showing up on other people's shows. Do an interview for an interview. Get on other podcasts, podcast swaps, intro swaps, things like that. That's in your area, in your niche, or in your neighborhood, I call it. So maybe like me, I'm a podcast host, but I have on SEO specialists, Pinterest specialists. Heck, I even have on people like JLD who are in my same niche. providing a different viewpoint. Next week, you'll get to hear from Travis Chappell, who helps people with being a guest expert and teaches you how to build a network, which, hint, hint, for him, building a network is not building a network. It's making friends, which is why he just rebranded his show. So collaborate, use other guests to host. You can have people come in and interview you. You can have your guests be somebody who you're training. And again, collaborate with other podcasters. That's number 7. Number 8 is you want to keep track of your performance. If you watch your numbers, even if you have low numbers, let's say one episode you have 5 downloads, one episode you have 15, and then you're back to 6, you can watch those numbers and you can really see what your audience is wanting to listen to. Yes, podcast statistics aren't the greatest, but there are some numbers you can use. So keep an eye on them, but don't let that discourage you, because remember, if you have 20 people listening to your episodes and you walked into a room of 20 people that were coming back to listen to you talk every single week, don't tell me those connections, if you actually reach out and have conversations with them, those connections couldn't lead to something further, whether that's a deep friendship or a collaboration or money by them becoming a client and you serving them. And then you want to keep your audience updated. So this is like, if you have any changes, leave cliffhangers. Hey, next week we're having this come out. Next week we're doing this, or let them know what's coming. Have you ever watched a TV show and it's like midnight and you're like, I really need to go to bed. And you're like, okay, one last episode. And that episode leaves on such a cliffhanger. You're like, I can't not come back. Make 2-parters, have a series, have people coming back knowing that they're going to be served. And the last but not least is you need to be consistent. These people that pod fade the most are the ones that aren't consistent because they don't get that consistent growth. So you need a regular release schedule. You need to ensure that your content is high quality. You need to do these things. So the 10 things that you need for organic is defining your niche, create that amazing high quality content, get your SEO under control, actually go out and promote your podcast, go engage with your audience, have other people come onto your show, collaborate with other podcasters and be a guest expert, analyze and look at the numbers, but don't get stuck in them. Keep your audience informed and be consistent. So I want to know which of these tips is the thing that's going to be the hardest for you. As long as you are persistent, your podcast audience can grow. Remember that it takes time and effort to grow a successful podcast. And it's not like social media that gives you those instant gratification hits. This is legacy content. But with the right strategy and persistence, you can grow your show without having to spend money on ads. So it's either your time or spending some money and potentially figuring out that system for paid advertising. Those are your 2 choices. But you really got to ask yourself, is this for me? And do I know that this legacy content is something that I can create and love on? So come hang out with us in the community. The information will be in the show notes. Or if you're really struggling with this, grab a free podcast CPR audit. That's just at podcastcpr.com. That's 30 minutes of my time looking at your business. And no, this isn't a trick to get you into a sales call. This is an actual 30-minute coaching session. And why I do this is because I want you to move one step forward in your business. And it's all about creating relationships. So if I help you someday, maybe we'll work together. Someday, maybe you'll refer someone to me. So that's why I don't use these as 30 minutes to explain to you how's the best way. It actually is a 30-minute strategy call where I look at your business, your podcast, and we come up with a quick strategy in 30 minutes to get you moving forward. So again, that's at podcastcpr.com. So go out and make today amazing, because you are beautiful, you are wonderful, and you are worthy, and your story is someone's life preserver. So start sharing it with the world. You deserve to have that legacy. No more ripple for you. It's time to release your tsunami of change. I will see you next week.